week of delay. So we have entitled this year webinar, The Next Chapter in the Struggle for UNDROP, Learning about the New UN Working Group. So I am Colline Hubert, I am the coordinator of Defending Peasants' Rights, and Defending Peasants' Rights is the website of Via Campesina, CETIM, Fian International and the Geneva Academy about UNDROP. It's the place to find everything on the UNDROP, training materials, experiences, case law, and much more. So to begin our webinar, I propose that we look at a small video. It's a video made by Defending Peasants' Rights and CAPIR, which is a feminist online media, and it was made during the 8th conference of Via Campesina back in December. Yes, and it's called In Defense of Peasants' Rights and Popular Peasant Feminism, Voices of Peasant Women and Via Campesina. Miguel, so if you want to share the video.
I can do it if you'd like. Just wait a minute.
Históricamente somos responsables del descubrimiento de la germinación y del desarrollo de la agricultura en la humanidad. Y es ese valor reconocido que documenta de alguna manera la Declaración de Derechos Campesinos. Para nosotras, entonces, implica recuperar nuestro rol también de productoras, sin dejar de ser reproductoras, para quienes decidan esa determinación de reproducir la vida.
Pour nous, comme étant jeune femme au sein de l'organisation de la Via Campesina, ce que représente pour nous effectivement est le féminisme paysan populaire. Donc, le féminisme paysan populaire, c'est une position prise par rapport aux souffrances des paysannes de la Via Campesina.
What I've learned from the Via Campesina and what I've learned in my organization and my community is that the food system that we want is based in feminist values, is based in inclusivity, is based in respecting diversity, because it's this diversity that makes our farms flourish, that makes our environments flourish.
Entendemos que as mulheres camponesas, nós pescadores e pescadoras artesanais, mas principalmente as mulheres pescadoras têm um papel fundamental nessa luta. Porque somos produtoras de alimento, colocamos alimento saudável na mesa da população e a nossa luta ela é pacífica, mas também muito intensa. Então é preciso que cada vez mais a produção das mulheres pescadoras seja reconhecida não somente pela ONU, mas por todos.
Hemos hecho muchas denuncias de acoso y agresiones a las mujeres campesinas y sobre todo también a comunidades campesinas en todo el mundo. Nos fortalecemos como movimiento internacional en todo este proceso. Nos reunimos en reivindicaciones básicas como es el derecho a la tierra, el derecho al agua, los salarios dignos, la salud y sobre todo los cuidados.
On ne peut pas parler de féminisme paysan populaire sans parler de la question de la formation idéologique et politique qui nous donne accès à une prise de conscience pour contrecarrer la logique dominante. Et la logique dominante par rapport à le patriarcat, par rapport à le système capitaliste pour l'implémentation du discours néolibéral. Et cela nous donne accès par rapport à la Via Campesina pour voir comment au fur et à mesure sortir de la domination impérialiste. Et la seule solution possible, c'est qu'ensemble pour une solution du féminisme paysan populaire.
In my region, we are victims in all kind of criminalization, especially with the patriarchal, very conservative cultural background. In that case, we are so happy to get the Person Right Declaration with the Article 4 with the women's rights, because especially in the women's in my region, we are victimized in a lot of kind of criminalization. Women cannot access to their lands, and especially natural resources like water and also the seeds, because seeds now it's under the companies.
So the United Nations Declaration is very important with specific reference to Article 4, which speaks on equal and effective participation of women in all spaces, which speaks to non-violence, all forms of non-violence, which speaks to equal access to financial benefits, equal access to social security. It also talks that women and youth need to be involved.
This is an opportunity through the declaration to really reshape how our food system operates with a lens focused towards the needs of women and also for the needs of those who identify otherwise.
Tenemos el gran reto por delante ahora de que esta declaración se haga efectiva, la tomemos como nuestra y la llevemos a nuestros países y esta sea una realidad. Las mujeres alimentamos el mundo y la declaración de la ONU es una herramienta para todas nosotras totalmente fundamental para poder garantizar nuestros derechos, los derechos de las mujeres en todo el mundo. Garantizamos la vida, el futuro de la humanidad y del todo el planeta.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Maybe before I present you the program, 2 small points. First, welcome to those who have joined us during the video. So 2 small points. We won't have the time to all introduce ourselves, but please put your name, organization, and contact in the chat. I've seen that some of you have begun to do it. That's wonderful. And also, this webinar is being recorded because we want to then be able to share the video for future use. Okay, so I can share with you my screen and we will go to the program. So the program of our webinar is the following. First, we will have an introduction with a more historical and technical point of view about the working group. So first, why and how La Via Campesina and allies work to have a working group on UNDROP, and what is a UN working group. So it will be by CETIM and Fian International. Then we'll have the biggest part of the webinar, which is a discussion with elected experts from the working group. We are very, very happy to have them with us today. Then we will have a part on the perspectives opened by the new working group from La Via Campesina and from Defending Peasants' Rights. And the concluding words will be by Morgan Odi, who is the General Coordinator of La Via Campesina. So let's begin first with why and how La Via Campesina and its allies worked to have the working group voted by Raffaele Morgantini from CETIM. Raffaele, if you want to go ahead.
Merci beaucoup, Colline. Je vais parler en français. Est-ce que vous m'entendez?
Thank you very much, Colleen. I'm going to speak in French. Can you hear me correctly? Okay, so welcome to all of you. Welcome, all of you. It is a pleasure to see so many people interested in this webinar, in this new mechanism that we will be discussing and addressing today. As an introduction to the webinar, I am going to try to present the historical context in which which is the framework for the creation of this work group. I'm going to talk about its origins and also the political and diplomatic process that led to its creation within the Council of Human Rights in the United Nations that adopted a resolution in October. This Council of Human Rights adopted then a resolution for the promotion of peasant rights, the declaration. We have to go back some years. We're going to look into the peasant movement led particularly by La Via Campesina and other rural organizations and peasant organizations that are allies, and they were able to secure a historical triumph in 2018 with the Declaration of Peasant Rights. This is the first international instrument that recognizes peasant rights within the context of the United Nations. I will not enter into much detail in relation to the process that led up to the declaration. That's not our objective today, but I really invite you to read about this process in our website, Defending Peasants' Rights. Maybe somebody can share the link to this page in the chat box. So, after the declaration in 2018, the international process enters a second phase, which is the phase of promotion and implementation of the declaration. This is a second phase, a phase of activism, so that normative reality represented by the declaration actually evolves towards a concrete and tangible implementation of rights of peasants on the field. This implementation takes place in different levels and along different lines of work. The main priority work is work at the national level. Peasant organizations mobilize since 2018 to sensitize, to create awareness, to train, and also to demand national authorities the guarantee of peasant rights in line with the implementation of the declaration, of course. Meaning that after presenting this juridical framework comes the moment of trying to implement it in each country's juridical framework and legal framework. Part of this work for the implementation and sensitization is also international. Actually, what brings us together today is very important, and it entails a very important strategy, political strategy that has also been taking place since 2018 at the international level. So after the adoption in 2018, the peasant movement began to mobilize in order to create a following or a monitoring mechanism, international mechanism, that is considered crucial to guarantee institutional implementation and of the situation of peasants at the international level, and also implementation of these different juridical developments in practice, and also to acknowledge the different violations of these rights all over the world. And the logic underlying all of this has always been to have political leverage that can enable an accompaniment and a support of strategies of states and also in local policies. How have we been able to achieve this mechanism? As you probably know, Bolivia, the plurinational state of Bolivia, was the leading country in relation to the agenda of peasants' rights at the international level. After Bolivia, we all wanted to follow this leadership in order to present a resolution in the Human Rights Council, because in this council, through resolutions that must be adopted by the council itself, is where decisions are made, fundamental decisions. And through these resolutions, we can create new instances or new special procedures, such as this work group. This process was delayed in a way in 2019 and 2020 for two main reasons. First of all, the coup d'etat that shook Bolivia at the end of 2019 and that put an end to the government that had supported LVC in this international process. So this was a big political process, the coup d'etat, that prevented us from counting on Bolivia. Bolivia was like the mother to this international process. And the second reason was, of course, COVID-19. COVID-19, of course, entailed a big delay in all the political processes because of the restrictions implemented that we all know about. But since 2021, and thanks to a new government in Bolivia, we were able to return to the work of activism at the international level that led to the work group. And starting from June 2022, we started very strongly on the sensitization and activism work to prepare the diplomatic terrain and to prepare the political conditions that were necessary for the presentation of this resolution that had as an objective the creation of this mechanism. In 2023, in the summer, we had the first conference in the Human Rights Council along with Bolivia and other diplomatic, collaborating diplomatic missions. Also, the FAO was involved at that time, other organizations, of course, civil society, Fian International, CETIM, LVC, and also the Geneva Academy. So, with this, the authentic work of sensitization and activism began to convince the diplomats, representatives of the different countries, and the different UN organizations of the need, to persuade them of the need of creating this mechanism for the defense of peasant rights. This work is always articulated with activism at the national level. International level articulates with activism at the national level to persuade public authorities in each state of the importance of this program so that ministries, pertinent ministries, can work side by side with their representatives in the UN. These have been then months of collective work, of thinking about what was going to be the ideal form for this mechanism. We have worked with the UN a lot, and we have held many work meetings with the different diplomatic missions, different UN officials, etc. After some months of work, and really, in the hallways in the UN, this work group started to take form, to be molded, and this process leading to the resolution was created, was crafted, led by Bolivia. We continued then with working with Bolivia and the Foreign Affairs Ministry of Bolivia in 2023, and there was a green light for our project in September and October 2023 during the sessions of the Human Rights Council. Bolivia working with a core group, a group of countries supporting Bolivia in this work of the presentation of the resolution. They presented this to the Human Rights Council. This is an interregional group that has Bolivia and Cuba for South America, Luxembourg for Europe, Indonesia and Kurdistan for Asia, and South Africa and Gambia for the African continent. After that, we have informal negotiations in the Human Rights Council, and finally the resolution was adopted on October 11th, 2023 with a broad majority, or by a broad majority.
All the countries in the south were voted in favor of it. You can imagine that there are some countries, the US and the UK, and 7 abstentions. I mean, they said no, and then there were 7 abstentions. But you can see that it is a great advance, a great victory, and it is an improvement for all the countries that were favorable for this. And mainly, the great news, which is that thanks to this advocacy work in the European capitals by the Via Campesina and our allies, we managed to obtain support of countries that had abstained before. I'm thinking about Germany, about Belgium. So this is the second large victory that we obtained. So now we have to continue working so that this working group can actually be useful to continue advancing on the promotion of our rights, but this is what we will listen to further today.
Thank you, Raffaele. So now we will hear from Sibyl Diren from Fian International. Sibyl?
Yes, thank you very much. I also hope you can all see me and hear me. Very welcome to the workshop, to all of you. It's wonderful. I also see people are still joining, so that's wonderful. I will say a few words about the question, what is the working group and what does it do actually? So a working group is, first of all, a special procedure, and special procedures are independent human rights experts with the mandate to support and advise on human rights, either from a thematic or from a country-specific perspective. Special procedures can be either an individual, one person, in that case we call them special rapporteur, or a group of 5, like in this case with the UN Working Group on UNDROP. And currently there are about 60 special procedures. Many of them you might know, like special rapporteur on right to food, right to water, on a clean, healthy and sustainable environment, on toxics, on human rights defenders, on indigenous peoples, and many others. And in this case, as I said, it's a working group. So a working group is always composed of 5 members, one from each of the 5 regional groupings in the UN. So one is the African group, one the Asian group, the Latin American and the Caribbean, Eastern Europe, and the Western group. And special procedures are mandated by the Human Rights Council. We have heard from Raffaella the whole process, how it was established. And what is also important to know that the members are elected for 3 years and their mandates can be renewed once for another 3 years. And independent in this sense, independent expert is also means that they are not staff of the UN, so they don't receive a salary from the UN. In the next slide, we see again that the person, the member that have been elected and finally appointed on April 5 recently. Between October and April 5, there was a process where people could send their applications, their dossiers, and these are now the 5 members of the working group that have been elected for the 5 regions. And again, we are very happy to have 3 of them with us today. The second question is what does this working group now do? What is the task? What are the tasks? And also how they can actually now promote the implementation of UNDROP. First of all, the working group will play an important role in promoting the rights of peasants and rural people by monitoring and reporting. They will monitor and report the progress made by states in fulfilling the obligations under UNDROP. And the group will also advise states about the implementation and as such contributing to development of national public policies, of programs, of institutions, with the aim to strengthen the realization of the human rights of peasants and other rural people. The working group will also undertake country visits. They will visit countries that, for example, require special attention regarding the implementation of UNDROP. And during the visits, they will meet local authorities, but they also meet civil society organizations, rural movements, peasant movements, and will exchange with them. And at the end of such a visit, they will always draft and publish a report that will be presented to the Human Rights Council with clear recommendation in it. Apart from that, they also draft thematic reports annually, always one that is presented at the Human Rights Council and one at the General Assembly in Geneva. And here again, represent right holders, representatives of rural movements, peasant movements, they can, during the drafting process of these reports, they can send submissions that will be considered in that process and will appear also in that report and shape the recommendations. And sometimes there are also consultations where right holders can participate directly with the working group. Another point is that the working group can send communication letters to states or other actors. And in these letters, they always have questions and recommendations. And again, here, these recommendations and questions are based on reports and allegations of violations of peasants' rights that were previously submitted by peasants and rural organizations along with other civil society organizations. So again, here, this is an important moment how to engage with the working group. Two more points I want to mention here is raising awareness. In general, the working group will help to raise awareness about UNDROP, and also it will increase the Human Rights Council's understanding and knowledge on how to now connect the realization of peasants' rights with other urgent issues, such as, for example, the response to the current multiple crises. The working group will also contribute to key discussions, always from a perspective of peasants and rural people, for example, on just the transition, agroecology, the challenges of digitalization, human mobility, and many other important topics. And the last point is that the working group will contribute to the development of international human rights standards. So it will strengthen states' compliance with their existing human rights obligations. And for that, the working group will also create spaces for discussion and cooperation where states can come and exchange on their best practices, ideas, and proposals on how exactly to implement UNDROP in different contexts. With that, I will end. You just see also here on the last slide that we have a fact sheet with this information, a bit more details about what is a working group, what does it do. You find it on our website, Defending Peasants' Rights, in 3 languages. So please, if you're interested, have a look at it. Thank you very much. I'll give back to Colleen.
Thank you, Sibyl, and thank you, Raffaele, for this very full and detailed introduction about the fact sheet. So it's already on the website, and it will be soon also on our social media. So now we will go to our the biggest part of our webinar, which is the discussion with the elected members of the working group. So as we said, we are very, very happy and very fortunate to have 3 out of the 5 members of the working group members with us today. So it is Shalmali Guttal, Carlos Duarte, and Geneviève Savigny. So thank you all for being here. And I will give the floor to Christophe Golay for moderation. Maybe I can stop the...
Yes, you can.
Yes, it's maybe better. We can all see each other. Okay.
Okay, so thank you very much, Colleen. Christophe Golay, I'm a researcher at the Geneva Academy of International Humanitarian Law and Human Rights. I have the pleasure of being one of the founders of the website, Defending Peasants' Rights with Via Campesina, CETIM, and Fian, and I'm in the editorial board of the website. I've been working on right food for 20 years, including with the first UN Special Rapporteur on the right to food, and on UNDROP for now 15 years now with many of you. So we have pushed for the implementation of UNDROP since 2018, including through the work of the website. And we are all extremely happy to have the working group created with excellent members who have been nominated. And so today I have the pleasure to moderate a discussion with 3 experts of the working group, as you understood: Geneviève Savigny, Shalmali Guttal, and Carlos Duarte. So I will ask a number of questions to them, and then participants will have time also to ask questions and discuss with them. So maybe I will start with Geneviève. Geneviève, you have participated in the negotiation of UNDROP. You were at Confédération Paysanne and at the European Coordination Via Campesina. Could you present yourself and explain what motivated you to become a member of the working group, and what specific perspective you will bring to the working group?
Oui, bonjour. D'abord, j'espère que la connexion est bonne.
Hello, I hope that my connection will stay stable. I'm in the countryside, so the connection is a bit unstable. No, but we can hear you well. Okay, my name is Geneviève Savigny. I've been a peasant for more than 30 years, a producer in the Alps of the south of France, and I've just retired. So I stopped my agricultural activities. During many years, I was also engaged from a union point of view at La Confederación Peasants'Day and La Via Campesina Europe. So we addressed a lot of questions to defend peasants, food sovereignty, the fair income for all of us within the European context. In 2013, I committed myself to a process that led to the declaration of peasants' rights. So we started working on a first working group where I was a witness to what the peasants were experiencing in Europe and how a declaration could be useful for all of them. There was a very important point, which is the way in which our agriculture has an impact on the rest of the world. I participated from this process that led to the declaration of peasants' rights in our working group up to 2018. And I was also following the implementation of this procedure with a lot of interest. So from La Via Campesina being part of these experts, in my case, who can contribute with a new approach, an approach that is more concrete to the rights and to contribute with the work that this working group is doing. That's why I think we were contacted as peasants from different regions from the world in order to send our applications to see if we could be part of this group. So then I followed the whole procedure, and then finally, I mean, this is something very new, very recent, but well, suddenly I was chosen, and I was very moved by it, with a feeling of responsibility that comes along with it at the same time for this mandate that I've just received. Thank you, Geneviève.
In the negotiation of UNDROP at some point. You were or still are at focus on the Global South, that's an NGO, you are in India. Could you also present yourself and explain what motivated you to become a member of the working group and what perspective you bring to the working group? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Christopher. Can you all hear me and see me? Is it okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, because my connection is also a little bit shaky. I'm in a rural area. So I'm Shalmali Guttal. I'm from India. I live in India in a rural area, and I work with focus on the Global South. And before I say anything else, I would like to thank La Via Campesina for supporting my candidacy in the UNDROP working group with their letter of recommendation. And I think I consider that to be a great honor. Why did I apply to the working group? Well, because of the deep respect I have for small-scale providers who not only feed, but really important small-scale food providers make food possible. They do this by nurturing ecosystems, biodiversity, by innovating, by building knowledge, and by so many different activities, food provision. I think many so-called experts may even be able to cognizant of. I think also I find UNDROP as a very unique and comprehensive and a forward-looking instrument. It recognizes the crucial, the life-sustaining contributions of small-scale food providers. And what it does is it lays out a range of actions that need to be taken to secure their rights, which are already covered and pledged in the different human rights conventions and declarations, but it brings them into under one umbrella, which is very important because then we have one, shall we say, human rights reference instrument to go forward with. I also think UNDROP is very relevant to the countries of the South, where we have such large proportions of our populations in rural areas, but there are also regular movement between rural and urban. And also at least 50%, more than 50%, in fact, of our populations are fed through small-scale food production. Now, I think because of the diversity of UNDROP's rights holders, it's important to have a multi-constituency approach in implementing UNDROP that brings together all UNDROP's rights holders in one collective strategy, addresses their particularities, but at the same time unites rather than dividing them. And I would want to draw attention, of course, to the implementation of all the human rights instruments for all the different types of rights, whether it's civil, political, social, economic, cultural, the rights of peasants, women, people discriminated against because of race, ethnicity, religion, gender and sexual diversity, and herders and fisher folk and workers. But I think we also need to draw special attention to the conditions and rights faced by migrant workers and rural communities who are living in conflict conditions, as we have seen what is happening in the world, where food is weaponized and the rights of many of the migrants and the people under occupation are unprotected because of the corporate and state sovereign and geopolitical interests. And I think finally, I would like to also say that I would like to emphasize very much the central roles of women and our young people in food provisioning, in creating knowledge, in family and community care, and also making sure that families have enough income to be able to have education and move their families forward in getting what the things that they need. And of course, our youth are the innovators. They are the food producers of tomorrow, and they are the technology users. So all our support for their rights must be to strengthen their agency and ability, especially of women and youth. So I leave it there for now.
Thank you so much, Shalmali, for this introduction. So Carlos, now you are professor of sociology at University Javier Lana in Colombia. Could you also present yourself and explain what motivated you to become a member of the working group and what perspective to bring to the working group? Thank you very much.
Vale, bueno, muchísimas gracias.
Okay, thank you so much. First of all, my regards to all of you, all those who are connected right now. Thanks, Christophe, Shalmali, Geneviève. I have 2 slides, actually, that somehow summarize my main motivation to join this group. Can you actually see my screen now? Can you see my PowerPoint? Okay, so it's 2 slides, actually, only that, but I think it is important. The first one is to introduce Narciso Beleño, my comrade. Narciso Beleño is a member, actually the chairman, the president of FedeAgro, Ms. Ball, that is part of the agrarian organization. Last year, he was saying that being a peasant leader is not a crime. That's what he said. That was his statement last year. And that phrase is very strong for me. He understood that this working group is immersed in the protection of peasants' rights. And the second slide, let me move on to the second slide. This is a picture of 3 days ago. Unfortunately, Narciso Beleño was killed in Santa Rosa del Sur by the paramilitaries of our defense ministry. So this is a tribute that I want to pay to Narciso that summarizes the needs of this working group. It shows how important this is. So being a peasant leader is not a crime. That's what he said last year, and 3 days ago he was killed. So I think that somehow this is a large summary of my motivation, of why I wanted to be part of this group within the context of Latin America and the Caribbean, where a large part of the conflicts and of the wars that we experience are somehow rooted in what happens in the rural areas. The wars have been wars against the peasants very often. The peasants or the peasantry in Latin America and the Caribbean is the most vulnerable population in terms of human rights. And I believe that this is a great support or push from my side. And then in my personal story, I'm an anthropologist, I'm a professor in the Cali University as well. I'm working on applied research. And I also in the Institute. I think that in the last 25 years has been to accompany a lot of peasant organizations, and I'm honored to have the acceptance letter by 3 peasant organizations of my country: the Agrarian Coordinator, the National Organization for the Well-being of Peasants, and the Organization of Peasant Users. Additionally, I'm also honored to be nominated by the current Agriculture Ministry, Mrs. Mojica, in a country and in a government that after 30 years has reformed the Colombian constitution to make peasants a subject of special attention.
De alguna manera es poder aprender, seguir aprendiendo de la mano de las organizaciones campesinas, ya no solamente en
I want to continue to learn from the peasant organizations, not only in Colombia, but also from the rest of the world in terms of their defense of rights. And also, I want to contribute part of what I have learned from my country, Colombia, in this exercise of a struggle for rights, and particularly the Committee of Peasant Rights, a process that took place in Colombia in parallel to the development of the UNDROP, and also was related to the survey, national survey, for which there was a particular category constructed referring to peasants. And I have been able to accompany the definition of peasant territories in territorial organization of the country and the declaration of certain areas specific to peasants in Colombia. So I hope I am able to learn and to contribute in this work group, also hand in hand with the international movement in favor of peasants.
Important testimony already. So the second question for all of you, and maybe we will start with Geneviève. How do you conceive the role of the working group in promoting UNDROP and in tackling the issue of international food systems controlled by an aggressive agribusiness sector?
Je crois que c'est certainement le problème.
I think that this is the main problem, without a doubt. Our main problem has to do with the fact that what we are developing right now is based on the growth of companies that concentrate, increasingly concentrated, I'm sorry. And the interest of this sector goes against those of small and medium producers. There are medium-sized producers that feel safe because they feel that they have a certain economic capacity, they have a certain surface of land, but they are increasingly endangered by the growth of this particularly aggressive agribusiness sector. What the declaration might achieve or might attain is to give means to small producers and informing them that they have rights, that they have right to life, to land, they have the right to develop their traditional systems, they have the right to select and sell their own seeds. They have all these rights that must be defended. They must be defended facing these companies and this concentration. Of course, we must struggle in a very precise way in order to consecrate these rights, but we must grant fishers, peasants, pastoralists, and rural workers this knowledge. They have to know that they have rights, because this is going to motivate and drive their struggle. Also, the right to association, the right to gather, the right to have access to justice. They might not know that these are rights. They are not applied in reality often because they do not know. So having a declaration that adopts and that is adopted by the different countries, of course, it must be translated into all the different languages of the countries, but this is going to be work that will enable peasantry to face the different obstacles that they face today. Of course, states have a lot of power. And in this sense, we might achieve that the big areas of concentrated market can also recognize these rights. There are some processes, for example, the work on treaties that limit the responsibility of companies that link companies to their responsibility or to certain responsibilities. All of this can also exert some type of influence. So it's about taking certain measures in relation to the different actors that are presented here. We still need to see what the processes are that might have more influence, more impact, so as to achieve that all the institutions, all the intergovernmental groups know about the existence of this declaration and know how it defends the rights of small and medium producers.
And in tackling the issue of the international food systems controlled by an aggressive agribusiness sector. Thank you.
You asking me now?
Yes.
Sorry? Okay. Yeah. Well, I think we have to review trade, investment, and finance policies and agreements through a human right lens to assess their implications for UNDROP implementation. And I think we need to, as a working group, challenge policy and all legal measures that enable these corporate agribusiness, agri-food sector. Now, I think the economic, financial, and political power of agribusiness corporations has to be dismantled. And this requires coordinated and simultaneous actions in many areas, no? So this includes trade, investment, market regulation, taxation, the dismantling of patent and intellectual property regimes, food and nutritional safety, for example, with ultra-processed food, the threat to environmental safety from pesticides and other agrochemicals, and of course, then the issue of land water resource governance, which is grabbing expropriations, evictions. So these need to be examined and challenged. And I know it sounds like a lot for one working group to do, but this working group has many allies all over the world, and many of our allies are on this on the webinar today. So I have full faith and confidence that our allies will step up and we will be able to produce this work together. I also think it's very important to investigate the causes and effects of indebtedness and debt traps at the household level, at the national level, and also the action of financial institutions, creditor cartels, and the private lenders on UNDROP, and then to promote food sovereignty, agroecology, and the markets that work for small-scale producers. We as a working group would need to propose with the rights holders, of course, how public investment and regulation in essential goods and services, agriculture, infrastructure, markets, water, energy, and so on, how this should support UNDROP's rights holders. And we have seen that privatization and deregulation hurt the UNDROP rights holders more than other constituencies. And they need to be rolled back. And finally, I think it's very important to pay attention to the nexus of power between states, the political power, and corporations, finance. But I will talk about this in another question. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, there are so many people today that it's very clear that you have already lots of support and possibility to collaboration. So Carlos, the same question. How do you conceive the role of the working group in promoting UNDROP and in tackling the issue of international food system agribusiness sector? Thank you.
Vale. Muchas gracias, Christophe. Bueno.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that question, Christophe. there are 3 or 4 slides that are going to help me address this particular point. The first one has to do with the issue of hunger. Is a universal issue today. This is a follow-up of the Sustainable Development Goals from the FAO, where you can see that 775 million people are undernourished in the world, and where we can also see how the pandemic and COVID-19 produced a devastating effect in the number of people who are hungry in this sector. 21-22 shows a certain decrease, but it still is an alarming number. The second element is that hunger is not uniformly distributed. Here we can see the prevalence of undernourishment at the global level. Of course, the global south has a highest record of undernourishment or malnourishment, but if we see historically, the situation is even worse. We can see that between 2015 and 2021, the global south have suffered this disproportionately for the longest time. Now, it is important to see that hunger is not felt uniformly within each national state. There are differences there too. In each one of these regions that we can see here, we have the rural sector, and we can see that the rural sector at the global level, and particularly in Latin America and the Caribbean, has the highest levels of hunger. And this is a paradox in relation to undernourishment in the world. Places where food is produced is where there is more hunger, which is an enormous contradiction of the food system itself, the food system that we have been building over the last years in the world. Finally, and I think this is very important, this is a map that tells us many things. I would like to focus on this, but before looking at this map, there was a UNDROP article. There is a UNDROP article that specifically talks about the food. It's Article 15. In Article 15 of the UNDROP, it talks of a right to adequate food or adequate nourishment, not only for peasants, and this is something that is taking place at the global level. But this map shows us the relationship between productivity of small-scale producers in relation to large-scale agribusiness producers. And the difference is huge, particularly in the countries in the south, where the gap between small producers and big producers is huge. But at the same time, there is a second aspect that is relevant in this discussion, which is that we don't have information from most countries, and this is the key element. And the third thing that I would like to mention is that the FAO is ultimately more worried about understanding food in relation to access to it without considering if it is poor or adequate food or nourishment. And this paradigm, and I believe that the paradigm of Article 15 has to do with food sovereignty, which is not the paradigm that the FAO shares. And so, first of all, we need to work on the mechanisms of the UN themselves in relation to measuring quality. The UN does not talk about peasantry, they talk about producers, and I feel that there is work that we have to do there, advocacy work, talking about these global mechanisms from the perspective of peasantry in relation to the UNDROP, or aligned with the UNDROP.
So a third question for all of you, maybe Geneviève first. How do you see the collaboration with the rights holders of the declaration in the framework of the work of the working group? Geneviève, you have the floor.
Alors, moi, je suis d'origine paysanne et toute ma...
I come from peasant origin. I come from a peasant family, and my commitment in terms of unions has always taken place within the peasant context. So I cannot imagine a relationship that isn't very close to organizations. Of course, LVC and all its allies and partners around the world, but let us not forget other peasants, other producers might be maybe less organized, such as, for example, fishers, pastoralists, that are also peasants, but they might be more isolated in relation to this information. They maybe do not have the same structure as our organization. And through this declaration, of course, the organization will continue to take shape. And these are maybe more isolated communities. This is, of course, a very important achievement for the peasant organization at large. Working with the different groups of peasants will be something, and the organizations will be something very, very important, and we have to look into how we will approach it. We need to devote time to this. We know that the means of this work group are limited. This we know. I think we have 1 or 2 missions a year in different countries. So we have to look into the countries that need more work. And where we are able to contribute with improvements, where we can contribute with more information, where we can present model situations, where we can intervene. But I know that we have this work group. It's a new work group. Our mandate will start on May 1st, formally, and we haven't discussed yet among each other, nor with organizations, to see how we can work in the best possible way.
So the collaboration with the rights holders, how do you see it in the working group?
Yes, thank you. And actually, just to follow up from what Geneviève said, I would like to say hello to Geneviève, my working group members. We have not met before. We meet today for the first time online. So I'm looking forward to working with this working group. Now, in response to this, the question, UNDROP is this result of struggles of peasants and small food providers. So now that it's here, its implementation has to be faithful to the needs and conditions and aspirations of UNDROP's rights holders. So for me, as a working group member, it is very clear that this working group should be working for rights holders. It should not be working for any multilateral bureaucracy. So our first obligation, commitment, loyalty, faithfulness has to be to UNDROP's rights holders. Now, for this, I think we also need to develop a collective strategy that is developed by and with the UNDROP rights holders. And just some initial ideas are, for example, we build a sandwich about UNDROP among all its rights holders. I think Geneviève and Carlos also already said. And I think we must also do this with the public, so that human rights is not the expert preserve or the expert area only of lawyers. At least in Asia, it tends to be that way. You need to get the public involved so we can build public pressure to translate UNDROP into national laws and protect the rights of our small-scale food providers. Then we can also build a body of knowledge that is grounded in the reality of UNDROP rights holders, so that any proposal, any recommendation that comes out of the working group is coming from grounded real knowledge, not just some theory. And of course, these include documentation of rights violations, the successful struggles and victories. And all this, the rights holders can do their own documentation where they're not able to, where they don't have strong organizations or support structure. They can do this in collaboration with their allies in academic institutions, with civil society organizations, and other researchers. And then I also think that it's very important for us to build expertise of the right within the rights holders, and so that, because UNDROP is the declaration of the rights holders, and the expertise and supportive networks for UNDROP should come from the rights holder and their close allies, their trusted allies, and their partners. These can be civil society organizations, they can be researchers like me, my organization, they can be academics, lawyers. Even there are supportive government officials, and there are some from multilateral bodies that might be very supportive for them. But I think eventually for implementation, the different provisions of UNDROP will need to be translated into national laws and regulations, but they also need to be reflected in regional and international financial, economic, social, environmental, and climate agreements. We have seen how, ISDS in trade and investment agreements, intellectual property laws, those kind of things completely undermine national regulation. No? So we need our own experts who can draft the language we need, who can guide us through this and also help us to navigate these national and international systems effectively. And, UNDROP is so welcomed by so much of our world, the food sovereignty movement, the agroecology movement, that I'm sure we have this support among all the organizations and the allies and partners of UNDROP.
Thank you so much. Carlos, the same question. So the collaboration with rights holders in the mandate of the working group. Thank you.
Vale, Christophe. Bueno, pues...
Okay. I think that we completely agree with Geneviève and with Shalmali. The UNDROP was possible thanks to the peasants' mobilization, and that's why its development has to go hand in hand with a conversation, with an ongoing cooperation with the peasant movements. I think that's the base, the pillar for our group's work. If not, without that, it would lose its main characteristics. Now, a second element, and let me just share the screen for the last time, last slide to share with you. This is a brief exercise that we were doing these days, analyzing the laws of the countries of Latin America and the Caribbean related to the peasantry. Not all the laws, of course, because it can be huge, there are many laws, but mainly the constitutions and the constitutional documents in Latin America and in the Caribbean. Most of them do not mention the peasantry. They do not mention the peasantry or agrarian workers or rural workers. So there are almost 20 constitutions that do not mention peasants at all. Therefore, I think that a big challenge ahead of us is the translation of UNDROP. Why? Because peasants, whenever it is mentioned, that word peasant, we do not mean the same thing. It is not understood. It's not the same thing. There are several constitutions that understand peasantry only as far as it is related to the agrarian reform. So this implies the classic concept of the 20th century in just a couple of countries, or like 5 countries. In other 2 countries, the relation between peasant and indigenous peoples, that's a very close relation. The most spectacular case, I think, is Bolivia, where peasant or indigenous member or an indigenous community is almost the same. And then there is something else, more like rural producer, mainly Brazil, Cuba, and Guatemala. There are 2 other countries that take different perspectives, but that take an approach from different dimensions, for example, which is the case of Venezuela and Mexico. And then 2 countries where they mention the peasantry in an interpretation line that you can say that is closer to the UNDROP. Bolivia and Colombia. But this is an exercise that helps us a lot to see and to put into practice what the colleagues were mentioning before. The first exercise of the UNDROP is to expand knowledge, and second, to give context and to adapt the context to each country. If not, if you just try to implement UNDROP likewise in all countries, people will not understand what we're talking about, what their rights are, and how the agreements of the peasant organizations worldwide are actually implemented here. So I think that this exercise of putting a context to it is essential. And then I think it is also important to mention that out of the 112 countries that voted in favor of UNDROP, 21 countries are from Latin America and the Caribbean. But so far, we still don't know, out of those 21 countries, whether they have actually conducted this kind of exercise to adapt the UNDROP to their own national laws and frameworks. So there is a lot of work to be done at first, and I think this is essential for our working group. At first, we don't know what the implementation of the UNDROP at a world level is like. And we need to do this. This is essential because not even the UN or the FAO, nobody has that information. And I think that that's one of the main or first tasks that we need to do, so as to have a framework to know how to work later on with the organizations and with the national states.
Thank you so much, Carlos. So we have now we have 20 minutes or a bit more for you to ask questions. So if you want, I also have questions if you don't, but it's also, as you are many, it's the possibility for you to ask questions to members of the working group. There was one question on the chat. It was how to contact the working group and how to send communications. So that's, I have sent a link to the, there is a page on the, how to send the communication to the working group, I mean to all special procedures, with information, so that might be useful. Can also send it in Spanish. Jessie, please.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. Learning from the field today, that's why I'm just checking. Hi folks, my name's Jessie McGinnis and I'm a young farmer from National Farmers Union of Canada. And I'm just wondering whether or how you will prioritize kind of an understanding and emphasizing buy-in of the UNDROP for young people that you encounter, and whether this will be kind of a critical part of your mandate given the crisis of generational rule that's taking place in so many countries. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Jessie. Olivier. Olivier, tu peux parler.
Oui, bonjour. Je voulais...
Hello. I just wanted to tell Carlos and the rest of the group that the subject that he said, I mean, the acknowledgement of peasants in different countries, on different regions within the 21 countries that voted in favor of it. The most important thing, which is the most difficult at the same time, is common to what we actually want to defend altogether. Okay, thanks, Olivier. Elvis?
All right, thanks. My question is directed to Shalmali. I hope I got it right, the name. I mean, I like your explanation. Just the challenge that I've seen from Global South, also I'm a lawyer by profession, is the implementation. At the level of implementation, I don't know how you envisage doing that unless you have a multi-level interventions of implementation approach, because the biggest elephant we are going to face is the multinational corporations. There is what we call commercial land grabbing going in Africa especially. So these will be the biggest giants unless you have a very clear plan in doing this implementation plan, because they're also going to argue from the point of law to say willing buyer, willing seller. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elvis, for your question. Farida, a last question, and then we ask the members to respond, and then we Farida.
Okay, thank you very much for this. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, thank you very much for this session, and it was very useful. I just wanted to know that the countries which have responded positively, Bangladesh is one of them, so if they have also the policies which goes against the peasants' rights at the same time, for example, seed laws and other laws which favors the corporations rather than the peasants. So how UNDROP is going to address that kind of contradictions in the countries?
Thank you very much, Farida. Okay, so we have already some questions about the participation. I mean, how you will include youth in your mandate. Question about food sovereignty, multinational corporations, and the contradictions in countries. So, Carlos, maybe you want to start?
Vale.
Okay. Well, there is a point that is essential in one of the comments. The peasant organizations at a world level, yes, they do have a great challenge in terms of the generational renewal. First of all, because the demographics of peasantry show that it is actually a population that is getting older quite fast. Second, because most of the youth, the young peasants, cannot see much of a future in the countryside and they are migrating to the cities. And third, because there's still not process to make this renewal, the generational renewal. So that is a vital and essential exercise to be done. And then we also need to work on the exchange of knowledge in a more horizontal manner, that is to say, the old generations towards the newest generations. And it is also important to make an emphasis between the technology and the peasantry. The peasants seem to be doomed not to be in touch with technology. And I think that that's not an efficient way of analyzing all of this, of making the youth becoming interested in the countryside. So that's important. And on the other side, the question about the transnational companies, mainly the food transnationals, which are quite hegemonic in many of our continents. I think that the main exercise, in addition to, translating everything and going to the social organizations, is to establish a closer relationship between the working group, the organizations, and the state bureaucracy. We have to have a say in public policy. The only way in which we can, or we might, face the local power or the governmental power that the multinational companies have, is to actually bring UNDROP stronger. If there is no development of UNDROP, this will just say in beautiful words, but that will not be fully implemented in our countries. And there were two other things that were being asked just now. Article 28. I think that's essential, yes, but so as not to make it regressive, yes, but we need to see what is its true implementation, because if not, there is no comparison point. We need to establish, therefore, dynamics and methodologies to translate everything to each context, and then to see how UNDROP is actually compatible with the different national contexts. So I would say that those are important points. And in Latin America, I repeat, it's essential to be able to UNDROP as an element that reinforces other mechanisms. For example, the mechanism for indigenous peoples. There cannot be competing ones against the other. If not, that would be a damage to several populations where they live together, whether it's all intertwined, the indigenous communities and the rural communities. So I think that that exercise is meant to be complementary to one another. In Latin America and the Caribbean, we have another declaration that was very strong for the last 10 years, which is of family farming. like small family farmers. And I think that that has to go hand in hand with UNDROP as well, so that the advances in family farming has to be more open to understanding not only peasantry, I mean peasants as a productive side. The laws understand peasants as the hands that produce, and they don't think that peasantry has also its heart related to the land, the culture, very much related, and that's very important to defend and to have in mind as well.
Shalmali, you want to respond to the questions?
Oh, sure. Oh, me second. Okay, sure. I will.
Also,
First, in response to the question of just, yes, for sure, we need to have a special strategy to reach out to the youth and to come up with a strategy with them, how UNDROP can be an integral part of the regenerational process, definitely. And I think by the same token, we also need to have this discussion with particular constituencies of rights holders that cut across, like women and people living in conflict areas and so on. So I look forward, actually, Jesse, to working with the youth movement in food sovereignty and agroecology to work out what should be our strategy to reach out to the young people and for the regenerational campaigning. I think also important to keep in mind that there are huge structural differences in the living conditions and the rural conditions, of course, I won't say global north and global south, because even across the south, there are such huge variations. An Indian rural countryside is very different, perhaps, from a Thai or from a Deshi or, from perhaps something that we see in Africa, no? So I think we have to understand from our side, there needs to be a tremendous amount of understanding as to why rural youth are not engaging in small-scale food production anymore and what's happening there. On the issue of, the point that Elvis brought up, yes, Elvis, I'm with you 100% on that issue. And I think all of us in the working group will be, because there is absolutely no way that one can work on the rights of small-scale food providers and the rights holders without seeing the embeddedness of land and territory. And I would just like to go back on this issue of the importance of our working group examining the investment agreements, the trade agreements, the economic partnership agreement, the aid agreement, because so much of aid is land and business. So it's extremely important that we go back to those agreements. We analyze those agreements through a human rights lens and see what implications they have on UNDROP. And of course, we will see that they are violating the rights by supporting land grabbing, by territorial expropriation, forced evictions, and so on. So I think we have to make those links and then also reach out maybe to other special rapporteurs in the UN system and see how we build up this voice to get the Human Rights Council in our report, to be able to challenge these trade agreements and investment agreements and economic partnership and financial agreements that take, that violate the rights, systemically the rights of the rights holders. And I also completely agree that one of the things from a positive agenda that we need to be pushing forward is that of a strong, not a unitary, but diverse, strong public economies across the North and the South, which will deliver for the rights holders of UNDROP. No, this current economy is not doing it. It's not even recognizing, as Carlos and Geneva pointed out, since the small-scale food providers. But I think just doing parallelism doesn't work. We have to push very strongly for food sovereignty, agroecology, and the kind of economies we want to build, which includes which should include very strong public goods and services. And finally, there is one challenge that I would like to put on the table, which I think is very important. I don't have a solution for it, and that is the issue of criminalization of rights holders, the criminalization of rights holder struggles, persecution, violent attacks, murder, incarceration, and so on. Carlos already mentioned it. We're seeing this across Asia. It's weakening the organizations of rights holders. It's creating fear. And states and corporations work together in this, and they silence the voices that oppose the status quo. And this nexus has to be broken. I don't have a solution for it, but we are all working and struggling in our own areas on this issue.
Thank you so much. Before giving the floor to Geneviève, I will just explain that because there was an exchange in the chat. So, dans le chat, il y avait une petite discussion. Il y a quelqu'un du Cameroun qui a demandé.
There's someone from Cameroon saying, how can we change Cameroon's position? Cameroon abstained in 2018. One of our comrades is here, and this person works in Luxembourg. And Luxembourg, for example, carried out a very important action in relation to the declaration. So we have heard that Cameroon voted yes for the creation of the work group in 2022. So Cameroon right now is supporting the UNDROP, and so it has been much easier to approach authorities in Cameroon and to ask them to collaborate. There are examples like this in Germany, for example, Germany and Belgium, that, as we explained before, initially had abstained in 2018, but Geneviève, you have the floor now. Yes, I would like to highlight one point. Of course, this work group, looking at the mandate, of course, we're not going to be able to do everything. We're going to have to focus on the points that are maybe more efficacious. But at the same time, we have to be connected with everything that exists, with other experts, with special rapporteurs, special mechanisms, work groups, to see how we can supplement each other and work together. I also mean outside of the Human Rights Council, people working outside of the FAO, within the framework of the civil mechanism, the CSIPM. I feel that we can create different collaborations so as to strengthen our movement as a whole. This movement that is struggling for food sovereignty, for agroecology, for human rights. We have to reinforce this. We have to strengthen this, because what we see is that organizations that defend the development of multinational companies and that defend regulations that facilitate this type of business, they carry out different mechanisms to facilitate their work and to ease their work and their advancement. So I feel that everybody, all people who defend peasants' rights, what we need to do is to get together, to be in contact, and this meeting ultimately is testimony to that, because we are having an online meeting when we need to continue to create these types of spaces, to continue exchanging knowledge, experiences, etc. So I think that we are also going to do good communication work that is also related to defending peasants' rights, the web page that is a tool for the dissemination of all this information. We have a lot of work to do thus, and I feel that having different sessions and different meetings, we will be able to make things move forward. Thank you very much, Geneviève.
Campesina.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. My name is Eliezer Morales. I am part of a peasant organization, a local peasant organization in Southwest Colombia. I first of all would like to congratulate Professor Carlos Duarte for the representation in such an important space. I feel that the accompaniment that he has been doing in relation to the peasant struggle has enabled us to have there, representing us, an ally, a person that knows us well. And we hope that all this knowledge, he will put it at the service of the peasantry at a global level, at a global scale. I just wanted to ask, or actually make a suggestion. I feel that there is a pretty important issue that as a peasant movement we should address. It is the fact that we are in relation are in a state of rights, and a declaration is very important as a mechanism, but we have to move to other types of more binding mechanisms, for example, a convention, so that this is not, we do not simply depend on the will of governments, but rather we turn this into a state policy at a global level. So I feel that a big task has to do with the fact that we take this declaration to another level, to a level that is more binding for states. And in this way, it does not depend on each government to apply it or not. I feel that this is a priority task, a task that as a movement we need to address. In relation to the rest, I feel that it is also important to relate or to state the role of peasantry in relation to fighting against or stopping climate change. That is, highlight the environmental relationship here. I feel that the international community is generating new discourses, but often we do not see that peasantry is playing a crucial role there. We need to change the view that the capitalist movement has of the peasantry as a predator actor, when our economy is an economy that is absolutely friendly with our ecosystems and biodiversity. And this is also going to entail the possibility of generating resources at the large scale so that peasant economy can be sustainable, can be attractive again, sustainable from an economic point of view. And this will be a task. For example, this year in Colombia, we will hold the COP16 on the Biodiversity Convention. And I think that it is important to take advantage deeply of this space so as to advocate. And within the strategy and action plans, it is important to clearly state the role of peasantry in conservation of biodiversity, and also to generate new dynamics in the allocation of state resources in this sense. I want to congratulate all of you, and I wish you much success for this enormous task that you have ahead, and the peasant movement, global peasant movement, will support you in this struggle. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Rafael.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you also to our experts that have shared your answers. I would also like to talk about the multinationals, the companies that has been mentioned. There was a question from the audience on this. I would like to mention that the UNDROP has a specific article about the need of regulating transnational companies, the need to regulate. This adopts the form of an obligation for all member states. It's Article 2.5 specifically. This entails that when we demand market regulation and agribusiness regulation, we can support ourselves on this Article 2.5 that establishes the obligation of all states to regulate transnational companies, among other actors, third parties, so that they respect peasants' rights. Christophe, I see that there are at least 3 questions that have been presented in the chat box and have not been responded yet. Well, if there's time, I'm going to read them now. There was one how we understand the distinction between the rights and the rights of indigenous peoples. The second one was about the contribution of the work group to the Palestine cause. And there was a third question about the selection of countries that we visited in the missions. These are the three questions that still remain to be answered. Sibyl has just responded in the chat box. The countries can apply. They can send out an application, and also the workflow will determine the visits and the countries visited. I don't know if anybody else wants to say something. There are about 50 countries that have not paid their dues to the UN. Those would be apparently left out because apparently the people who will work in this work group. Well, this is still to be determined. The countries are still to be determined.
Carlos, do you have comments on what was said?
Pues, a ver, lo primero, creo que
Well, first of all, in relation to this relationship between peasantry, UNDROP, and Declaration of Indigenous Rights, Indigenous Peoples, I mentioned it a while ago, but I think it's important to restate. The message is that we cannot see these as competitive scenarios, but actually as complementary or supplementary scenarios, because another understanding could be a certain action for intercultural relationships and territories. And not only in relation to indigenous peoples, but also Afro-Latino communities. There are a series of special rights in different countries for these populations. And for the ILO, these are also considered I got an email from the UN saying that the idea is to visit 2 or 3 countries a year.
Trabajando. Creo que no nos podemos circunscribir al presupuesto que tenemos hoy porque ya vimos que oficialmente es bastante limitado y tendremos que ser inventivos dentro del grupo de trabajo para poder extender, digamos, el nivel de nuestras comunicaciones tanto con organizaciones sociales en primer lugar, la cooperación en segundo nivel y los mismos estados nacionales.
Thank you. So the last question will be by Alberto, and we give floor to Geneviève and Shalmali. Alberto, Urbina.
Hola, buenas tardes, buenos días. Soy Alberto de Manos Unidas desde España. Una pregunta para los miembros del grupo. Sé que ya lo habéis mencionado posiblemente a lo largo de la exposición, pero a nosotras como organizaciones de la sociedad civil, organizaciones no gubernamentales, ¿cuál sería la recomendación o el trabajo específico que nos pediríais o cómo podríamos desde nuestra misión, desde nuestro trabajo, colaborar con, bueno, pues el desarrollo de esta declaración? Y eso sería todo. Gracias.
Merci, thank you so much. Alors, so Geneviève, maybe you can want to say something?
Moi, je vais répondre déjà à la question sur la Palestine. Il nous semble que là, c'est une violation si forte de l'ensemble des droits humains qu'on ne pourra pas ne rien dire depuis le point de vue où on est. Via Campesina a fait plusieurs webinaires pour éclairer la situation en matière de la violation des droits des paysans, des paysannes sur la terre, sur l'accès aux ressources, sur la destruction de leur outil de travail, que c'est aussi un des endroits où on doit dire quelque chose Et on verra avec notre groupe comment on le fait de la manière la plus pertinente. Je vois aussi que effectivement notre travail ne peut pas se limiter je dirais un petit peu au minimum que nous permet les moyens du Conseil des droits de l'homme. Et là aussi, je pense que collectivement, on doit mettre en place une stratégie de recherche de fonds, de mise en place de projets de façon à être plus efficace. Et pour savoir comment les différentes organisations peuvent contribuer, un peu comme je le disais, on est dans un ensemble d'organisations qui luttons pour la même chose et d'organiser des événements, de faire des études, tout ce qui peut contribuer à la connaissance de la situation et faire dans un sens écho de ce que nous allons faire dans le cadre du Conseil des droits de l'homme et ce que les gens font sur le terrain avec leur gouvernement. Si on arrive à communiquer et à utiliser les uns les autres notre travail, je pense que ce sera déjà productif.
Merci beaucoup, Geneviève. Il y a une question dans le chat sur est-ce que le groupe de travail peut travailler avec les États sur la question de l'UPOF? Alors, je vais juste, je pense que voilà, je vous ai pas forcément besoin de répondre, mais en fait, par exemple, le rapporteur sur le droit à l'alimentation a fait un rapport entier seulement sur le droit de semences, dans lesquels il a fait de très nombreuses recommandations. Donc voilà, c'est tout à fait quelque chose que des procédures spéciales. Nancy, do you want to speak? Yes.
Thank you very much for the floor, and thank you for the insights that you've shared. My question is, how do farmers organized in self-help groups be supported to be part of this conversation? Because most of them are the ones who bear the burden of the food system. But when it comes to decision making, they are left behind. What and on is them on at their part of this conversation.
Thank you so much. And so that was the last question, and I give the floor to Shalmali to end this part of the discussion, and then we will have another part of the last part of the webinar. So Shalmali, you have the floor.
Thank you. Firstly, I just wanted to say that I'm sorry I didn't respond to an earlier question by Farida Appa about how many governments are actually, even if they have voted for the declaration, they have anti-peasant, anti-small-scale food provider policies. That is absolutely true, and I come from a country where that is very evident. And I think what the working group should be doing is also collecting those cases. No, I mean, we need to document very specifically and precisely as possible. And I think Geneviève and Carlos have also mentioned this point, that be as precise as possible as which rights are being violated and how. In terms of how to make sure that, oh, sorry, I'm getting a message. No, you hear me in English?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
And I will cancel that. Some message to me anyway. In terms of how the rights holders, how the small-scale food providers can be an integral part of the working group, I think 2-3 things. One is that the working group have not yet met. I know Geneviève and Carlos, we all got the same email today asking us to have a call. We will have a call on either the 29th or the 30th. And then hopefully after that, we can set up our own channel among the working group to discuss 5 of us, no? And come back to everybody. But I would like to emphasize here the importance of building a collective strategy. And this collective strategy is not only of the working group, it's of the rights holders. It's of the organizations and the movements of rights holders. And what the working group is there to do is to support, And this kind of a collective strategy would then take in the particularities of different rights holders regions. It will be fine strategy, not a competing one. I think Carlos also talked about that. We have to avoid this competition at any cost, at any point. But at the same time, all constituencies are not the same. All regions are not the same. They have their own particularities. They have their own challenges. So we need to find a way to come up with the collective strategy be useful and to opportunities, but at the same time be a unite force, and so we can build our collective strategy. Now, I think the size of UNDROP's rights holders, it's more than half the world's population are small-scale food providers, no? Whether they're workers or indigenous or fisherfolk, more than half the world population, and they're very diverse. So I think this size and diversity is a tremendous strength in terms of being a countervailing power of rights abuses, because after all, look, UNDROP is here. Why is UNDROP here? Why is UNDRIP here? Why are so many human rights conventions there? They're there because of people's struggles. So I think we make this, let's recognize the power of UNDROP's constituencies and rights holders. And I think we will be able to get many resources from that, although of course we continue to look for other resources there as well. And the last thing a few things I'd just like to say is that I have never worked inside a UN system. I have worked on the CSIPM and the CFS, and I worked on some of those other types of financing for development, etc. But I can say now, from a working group point of view, that it's a limited space. So we need to complement the moral legitimacy, if there is such a thing, in the multilateral system anymore, because the multilateral system is selling out to corporations, right? We've seen that with the partnerships to the World Economic Forum, the CropLife International, and so on. So we need to somehow use whatever we can in the multilateral system, use every article we can, link it with every instrument that we can to push for an ethical protection of the rights holders. And at the same time, not forget that the real fight is on the streets and it's in the struggles. So the struggles on the ground and what we are able to do inside the UN Human Rights Council need to go together. And on the issue of Palestine, totally agree with Geneviève, and I think we have to really support the case of genocide that was filed by South Africa.
Thank you so much. Just on the country that will be selected, they will decide. Of course, they need to have the agreement of the country to do a report. They have other possibilities to put information on case studies through communications, even in the thematic report. It can be also done. You could also do press release or these kind of things. Finally, so we now enter the last part of this webinar with the perspectives on the working group by Via Campesina and its allies, and then we will have a conclusion by Morgan Oddy, who is the general coordinator of Via Campesina. So Colleen, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you. So thank you all for your presentation and for all the questions. So now we have heard from your point of view from the working group members. So now we can go to see the point of view of Via Campesina, and also we will finish with what will be happening for us at Defending Peasants' Rights. So what this working group is going to change, is it going to, what perspective is going to open, how it's going to be included in the strategy for implementation of UNDROP for Via Campesina. And for that, we have also the chance to have Zainal Arafin Fouad with us, who is going to present this for Via Campesina. And after his presentation, maybe we'll have like 5 minutes for questions. Zainal, are you here?
Yes, thank you, Colleen.
Yes, go ahead. Great.
Okay, good afternoon, good morning, especially first of all to all the member of working group at Patient areas, Shalmali, Carlos, and Geneviève. Congratulations, and of course we will work together in monitoring, implementing of the UNDROP. Can I share screen, Colleen?
Yes, of course, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Yes, maybe we already know that we, Via Campesina, with allies already struggle for UNDROP. You saw my screen, Colleen?
No, it said that you have started to share, but there's nothing. It's just blank.
Okay, yes, totally we work until having working group is
I'm sorry, Zainal, but I don't think we are
years, yeah, from
seeing your screen. I think maybe you need to select another screen, or maybe just do it again.
hello, you tell me, Colin?
Yes. I'm maybe I'm the only one with the okay.
Okay, yes, yes, for Via Campesina, of course, we very happy and grateful with the working group, and then we can work together to implement and to monitoring UNDROP. So actually, we have already
I'm
worked
sorry,
on.
Zainal. Again, I have to just to let you know, because we are actually not seeing your screen. We are only just seeing a black page. So I think you need to select something else, or maybe just quit share reload. I don't know.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No problem.
So problem in my laptop. Sorry. For our screen, I can sorry. I can okay, maybe I will not share screen, just reading my presentation. Colin.
Okay, we are listening.
Okay, yes, of course we have already and continue with training education for patients to for education of the UNDROP to all member, and also socialize with other social movement, NGO, as the as question from Alberto, I think from Spain, how the role of NGO. So that's why we work together with NGO, also with academies, to socialize the UNDROP. And second is how to harmonizing UNDROP with the laws of at national level. As Rafael said on the article number 2 on the obligation of government, and also I think it's also good example in Nepal. I so actually promise want to share about UNPA struggle on how they harmonize the UNDROP in international level. Like in Indonesia, we have like the law of food, the law of patient protection and empowerment, the law of agriculture, the law of the plant cultivation system, the law of trade, and many things that this is our task of PI, how to harmonize UNDROP, to harmonize with UNDROP. And then also about the how UNDROP and also working group with together to monitoring of the food system, because we have the many cluster on food system. I will try to try share again. Yes, you see, Colin? Yes, so I just repeat already said by Shalmali and others that how Via Campesina struggle to achieve food sovereignty based on the UNDROP. For example, we have mean of two land, water, and territory. So it is linked with the agrarian reform. Last month in Bogota, we attended the global land grabbing, yeah, in Bogota. So this linked with how the UNDROP linked with our struggle for land, water, and for territory. And then our enemy, as Shalmali said, is about how we facing market agrarian reform, and then commodification of nature, also linked with the World Bank, IMF, and others. And then we also have struggle in the mode of scale of production, and also on the fighting like green pollution. So why we have seed agroecology, biodiversity, and we have enemy also on the UPOF, WTO, and then we also link with the energy model of the energy use linked with the climate change, and also with the first surface scale of first surface linked with the middle processing and the mode of distribution, especially for how UNDROP can use tool of struggle for our struggle against WTO and FTA and many things. So then we can say that how this of the many areas of struggling with all the article in UNDROP. So this part how we work together with the member of the working group in monitoring in implementing UNDROP. Then I also want to comment with Carlos about UNDROP family farming. Yes, we already Campesina already work on the how we implement UNDROP family farming linked with UNDROP. Yeah, especially FAO just already released the book on with many areas, especially on family farming, youth and gender equality. It is linked with the question of Jesse on how UNDROP and with youth. Yeah. So then it is also how UNDROP linked with the scope of many group in the definition of patient. Yeah, like it is I taken from the UNDROP family farming. For example, rural property, farmers agriculture, small fisheries, pastoralists, mountain farming, forest farming, people, youth, and rural women. And then how, or like for example, how UNDROP is already put in the complement or to other global in the voluntary guideline on small scale fisheries, and also how also already linked with the UNDROP I mentioned before. So I think all the how Via Campesina implement UNDROP, and then of course we will work together with the all member of UN working group. And then SPI conducted a webinar. So invited Shalmali to discuss about the next step. So there is input from fisheries organization. At national level, we created a group to support the member of a group. And in this case, we can how we from Indonesia, maybe from Thailand or a country have a group to support member of working group, especially how we can make a report on the how our government implement UNDROP. I think that's all, Colin. Sorry if I take much time to share about our perspective. Thank you very much.
No problem, thank you. We actually have only a few minutes left, but I see that we already have one hand raised. And maybe we have question also. I have seen some message, someone asking if it was also possible for you, Zainal, to share the document with us. Sami, do you want to ask a question?
Hola, buenos días.
Hello, good morning, everyone.
¿Me escuchan?
Can you
Yes.
hear me? Yes. It doesn't matter, I already posed my question in the chat box because there's just a couple of minutes left. My question was whether the working group can support actions, constitutional actions, or strategic lawsuits for the demand of peasants' rights. That was my question in the chat as well.
So, because we only have a few minutes left, maybe we can leave someone answer on the chat. That's really good. And we will take one more question, and then I will go to present a defending peasants' rights perspective. Yes. Claudio, do you want to say something?
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry, I had a bad connection. I'm somewhere up country in Vietnam. And I don't know if this was mentioned, but the key thing for me is to relate agroecology, on food sovereignty and health, because I'm from the People's Health Movement. That interests me of how these things get together. And agroecology and food sovereignty and health all have their own languages. And the people who work in there use those languages in their everyday work. But the new thing, or the new, not so new thing, is basically the concept in health that has to do with the social determination of health. And that applies also to the social determination of agriculture. And the difference is that that provides a common language, because when you talk about the social determination, health, agriculture, you're talking about the structural determinants. You're talking about the capitalist system. You're talking about the inequities and inequalities that you find in the system. So the idea is that most of our people, maybe the ones that are participating in the webinar today, spend perhaps 80, 90, or 95% doing their thing in agroecology, their thing in food sovereignty, and we are doing some of our things in health. We have to spend a higher percentage of the time working on the determinants that have problems with agriculture, have problems with the livelihood in the rural areas, and with health. Because if we solve the social determination or social determinants, we will have less problems in health, less problems with agriculture that is industrialized, and we will have a much brighter future for food sovereignty, which of course includes health well-being of the people living in the rural areas. Thank you.
Thank you, and of course, right to health is included in UNDROP. So if you may now, I will share with you the perspective from Defending Peasants' Rights, so our website. Just in a few words to let you know that for us at Defending Peasants' Rights, and by us I mean Via Campesina, CETIM, Fian International, and the Geneva Academy, we see the arrival of the working group as a way to reinforce our role and reinforce the struggle for UNDROP implementation. So our first role, of course, is to inform about the existence of the working group. This is why we are doing such a webinar, and this is also why we are recording it, and we will share again all of the very, very valuable knowledge that we have shared today. Then the second role of Defending Peasants' Rights is to provide training materials of about UNDROP and the rights enshrined in it, but now also on how the working group works and how right holders can interact with the working group and with the members of the working group. And then something very, very important for us is passing on experiences. We have a whole category on the website about struggles, peasant struggles, and now we will also include all of the experiences around the working group. We will very soon also share experiences that have already happened with other special procedures, including UNDROP, because some movement, they already have made referral to special procedure and to special rapporteur about rights on child in UNDROP. The point of that is to have a concrete example to draw inspiration from. Really, you have an already good example on how it works, how it's written, and then you can draw from that to do your own referral. And of course, once the working group will be doing all of its tasks, we will be able to report it on the website. And then last but not least, of course, is to put people in contact. Sorry, there's a noise behind me. Not behind me, it was behind someone else. Okay, better. Yes, to put people in contact, it's very important for us that we don't only stay in writing or online, but also to be able to talk to each other, to share experiences, good practices. That's also why we are doing the webinar. And to make sure that if you are reading something very interesting that you want to have more information about or go deeper in or have first-hand knowledge, you can always ask us and we can try to put you in contact with the person who has done the writing or the one we are reporting about. Yes, so that was very quick because we don't have much time, but just to remind you that really defending peasant rights is a tool for all of you in the struggle for peasant rights and for the implementation of UNDROP. And I don't know if it has been done, but we can also share it again on the link again to the website on the chat. And you can always write to us. You can share your stories, your experiences, your good practice with us, and we will be happy to publish them on the website. Okay, so now we are going to the conclusion of our webinar. And for that, we have a video by Morgan Odi. Morgan Odi, who is the general coordinator of Via Campesina. Unfortunately, she's not with us today because it's also the day of the General Assembly of the European Coordination of Via Campesina. So I will share with you her video.
Hello, everybody. My name is Morgan Odi. I am a farmer from Brittany, France.
I'm going to switch. Yes, better.
And I am General Coordinator of Via Campesina. In October, we celebrated a great victory, the decision of the United Nations Human Rights Council to create a working group for the implementation of the UN Declaration of Peasant Rights and other people working in rural areas. To us, the launch of this working group is crucial because we consider that peasants' rights are a means of fighting against the discrimination and criminalization suffered by peasants around the world. Peasant rights are, of course, rights for peasants, but they correspond to obligations of the states. Here I have Via Campesina's notes on the UNDROP. We can read that among obligations are freedom of thought, freedom of opinion, of expression, association, the right to participation, the right to information, the right to work, to food and food sovereignty, to land, the right to seeds. For each of these rights, it is necessary to implement specific public policies in each country that can make possible fulfilling these rights. Therefore, we hope that this UN working group will enable the visibilization of the policies for the implementation of these rights, as well as defining the policies and the practices that violate these rights. In this way, being able to change legislation and construct public policies in all states that lead to the fulfillment of human rights. When we talk about the realization of peasants' rights, we must take into account all the public policies that need to be implemented to protect the rights of peasant women, the rights of access to land. Particularly when thinking about right to land, for example, we need to take into account policies for land redistribution that enable guaranteeing the right to land for peasants all over the world. Agrarian reform policy, land regulation policies, property prices, agricultural land management policy, etc. If we think about the right to food sovereignty or minimum salary, this corresponds to the obligations of the states to apply public policies regulating the agricultural market and to combat the power of multinational companies in order to guarantee that the price paid to farmers and peasants is enough for them to obtain a decent or dignified remuneration. And there are examples like this in other issues. For example, right to seeds. We must fight against biopiracy conducted by seed companies. If we talk about participation in public decisions, we must launch instances that favor the participation of peasant organizations in all decision-making mechanisms on agricultural policies. Therefore, this is very important work. The 5 members of the UN working group will have to do this difficult work, but to us, this is essential long-term work that will enable us to really make changes in the promotion of the rights of farmers and peasants, as well as people who work in rural areas, agricultural workers, fishermen, indigenous peoples, etc. But this will also allow us to move forward in everything related to the social rights of the rest of citizens. Thank you very much. I wish you the best work.
Thanks, Morgan. I'm sorry, I have to switch interpretation. So yes, we will thank Morgan, of course, for her words, for our conclusive words to our webinar today about the working group. I want to first thank the 3 working group members for being with us. We know it was very, very early Mondays, and it was so interesting and so inspiring to hear from you. I want to also thank everyone from LVC and defending team for all of the organization. We want to, of course, make a big thanks to the interprets. Without them, it would not be possible to do such a webinar at this international scale. So really, really thank you. And of course, I want to thank all of you for participating, for asking questions, for sharing also your stories on the chat, for being there, for listening, for being interested. And that's with all of us that we will keep the struggle for peasant rights and for the implementation of UNDROP. And on those words, this is the end of our webinar. And I hope you have found it interesting and inspiring. And I hope that you will also go to our website and keep being inspired.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
And big thank you to the interpreters again.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks to everybody. Goodbye.
We're looking forward to working with all of you on the
Goodbye.
webinar here today.
Yeah, see you soon.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Colline, tu arrives à extraire le chat?